joining me. My name is Heather Downing. I'm from Kansas City in the States, and this is my first time to Porto. So before you all leave, if you're brave enough, please come up and tell me what I should have been experiencing. I'm very interested in that. Oh my goodness. What do you think this talk is about? Did you read? Do you know? I bet you do. So this talk is about what it's like to be going from an individual contributor to suddenly a manager, because we all know that you are brilliant and great coders, yes? So the first thing we're going to do is ask for more money, which everybody should ask for more money. Yeah. So what happens when you ask for more money? They say, great, here's more money and a promotion. Now you have a team of 16. Surprise. Or maybe you put in for the same job that your coworkers did. So out of the 4 of you, you got it. Now you have a mix of emotion, right? You're like, yes, I get more money and responsibility, but I was competing with my coworkers. So how are they going to feel about that? Let's talk about this journey a little bit. Most of the problems that I've seen when I went to go work for somebody at any company, or even just as a consultant, was always running into personal problems communicating with somebody who had this exact path, right? If only their company invested in them learning how to treat people. So instead of waiting for your company to do that, let's just take control and learn a little bit about this. So this is going to feel a little bit like a TED Talk. If you've anybody watched TED ever? Yay! So you're already halfway there. So I'm going to use very fuzzy words like kindness and empathy, and selflessness and reflection. And you're going to roll your eyes, because I did for many years, until I realized that the reason many people are leaving their companies right now is not just pay, it's because they hate their manager. It's even worse when they used to be a coder like you, right? So, can we all agree that each one of you are brilliant and you're on the way up, right? And just give me a little bit of your time, and we'll talk about some scientific ways to approach personalities, but also where people are at in their career. Okay? Good deal. So I want you to think back to when you got to the top of your game on any subject. If you're very humble, like me and many others, you will think, I'm not at the top of the game. I don't know what I'm doing. .NET just changed for the 12th time, right? But you know that one moment where you get in the flow state and things are just working, and you only had to build it once or twice and it just worked, and you feel that wonderful emotion, right? But if you do that often enough, you no longer look at the ease in which you do things. You're looking for the problems, which is why you feel the problems more acutely, because you feel like, I've been doing this for a while and I should just know what the answer is. That's how you know you're kind of up there, because you're actively looking for problems, right? You're in that wonderful flow state. But do you remember what it was like when you began? Can you really remember? And I asked this to a programmer of 25 years. He's like, I have no idea how it was. Because tech has changed so much, right? Just in the past few years for me, that I can't imagine what it was like to face challenges with something simple like a console app. To me, I'm like, oh, I know how that works. Did you in the beginning? Do you remember what that was like? Let's go back there, if you can try, okay? That frustration of figuring out a new concept without any context. So you have no idea what a console is, first of all, and then you're being told, okay, just make this magic 8-ball app that just magically works. Great. What do? Do I just start typing? Now I am taking you way back, right? Do you remember the hours you would spend trying to decipher what part of programming really is from like the data science part from the algorithm? Do I need to know algorithms? Do I need to write algorithms? Turns out most of us probably not. We just need to use algorithms in the right way, right? And that blew my mind. I was like, you mean I'm another layer on top of other programmers that are on top of other programmers that go all the way down? Oh, that's pretty cool. But in the moment, I thought I had to know every single part of it for every language, for every application, right? And so that stress of just not really understanding, but trying to go forward anyway, you began to wonder if you had enough space in your brain to figure it out, at least if you are like me. I have severe short-term memory loss. So imagine trying to cram for an exam. Doesn't work for me because it takes time to transfer from the short-term memory to the long-term memory, just like a computer. I'm just buffering for a very long time, right? So that means that the way I had to work was by reference. So once I was allowed to use Google more often, I would Google things and my own articles on Stack Overflow would pop up. Like, oh yeah, that's how I did that. Has anybody else done that? Where you're searching for something and then you're like, oh yeah, I figured that out 2 years ago. Okay, cool. But you still feel like this and revisit this emotion occasionally. Now, let's just say you finally did that first app and you feel like a wizard, right? The first time I got that Magic 8-Ball app to work, I showed freaking everybody. I'm like, look, 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 it does this thing. They're like, yeah? So, like, no, but like I wrote that. Like, from scratch, I did it. And they're like, okay. I have a calculator, probably could do something like that too. But you have that moment. This is when you were hooked and now you're a programmer for life, right? So you're excited and you're like, great, do I think that I can make money at this? You throw your hat in the ring and say, I'm a junior developer, but I am willing to learn and work in a team. So they throw you on a team because you're cheap and why not? And they throw you in a team and say, okay, now it's to start coding. Okay. But remember, your various levels of knowledge here and various personalities. Did anybody tell you what it was like to have to share pull requests? Do you know anything about these agile stand-up meetings and everything? Nobody taught you that in school, did they? Nope. They just said, hey, this is how you make an app. Not telling you that 80% of the other time is dealing with all this other stuff, right? So you get to find out at this stage. You're thrown on, you're clearly the underdog in the team because everybody else has already been there. So now you've had to figure out a dynamic. So this happens as early as the first to second year, okay? This is so crucial that most dropouts now from tech leave after the second year because this is their first experience. You meet all different kinds of programmers all around you. Some people are really friendly. Some people are helpful. Some people just feel like you're a threat or you're annoying because they're busy trying to actually do the work. Okay? This sounding about right? Yeah. And it's not exclusive just to the States. I've sat in on many, many different team meetings all over the world, and it seems like the same problems. Is that suddenly you're just in it and you have to help, but you're not really that helpful. You're more of like a learning student. But then you become more of a mid-level developer and certain things start coming to you and you start providing some value and you know, you thought as you grow, you would amass this amazing knowledge, right? And everybody would come to you as the all-knowing being, but you're just excited that you made fire, right? And so this right here, this moment, is how you bond with your teammates, right? You're like, dude, did you see how this library works? It's so much better than this other one. That's how I was with hashing algorithms. That's super nerdy. You talk to me about it later. I'm like, did you know that it takes this long to crack this and this long? It was crazy, right? That's how we bonded. So now you're valuable, but you do just enough to, you know, maybe get yourself in trouble. Then you go through some real hardships where you have shipped code that has broken and it is your fault. And you've learned what not to do. And so now you've become this person who can sniff out the trouble before it even hits the team. And you're feeling pretty good about becoming a senior, right? Now, this is all internal. I'm not saying you're actually acting like this, but internally, you're like, hey, I can see the fire coming before the fire comes. So you should just take what I say. And you're feeling pretty good about this. And you should feel good about the journey that you've taken. But remember, success is a lousy teacher. It seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose, right? I'll tell you what, Most people who have built the systems that have recently been hacked did not think that they were being lazy about it. They thought they had a perfect system together. But keeping this in mind, because you are the one on the team that did sniff that out, you seem like a big thinker, like a high level thinker. Tell you what, let's get you promoted. Great. And you're excited because you worked your ass off and you finally got recognition. And now your entire career is changing. So if you wanted to keep coding, I hate to break it to you, management probably isn't the ladder you want to go. There are managers who still code alongside their team members, but they're not as effective at holding all of the bad things that are rolling downhill because they're too busy actually building with you to get things out of the way for you. It doesn't mean that there aren't levels of it. There's definitely like senior developers, architects, lead developers, but once you're a manager and you are responsible for the pay of your team, this all changes because now you have power that is a lot bigger than just whether or not you choose a good library. Are we in agreement on that? Okay. I love this quote. People buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. And when you have an interview, whether you're the one giving it or receiving it, you make that decision in the first 3 to 4 minutes. Yes, they're longer, and if you go to Amazon, it's like all day and it's rounds and rounds of it. But really, you make the decision in the first 3 to 4 minutes based on how they treat you. And if you're on the receiving end, you make that decision based on how much they put you at ease, that they believe that you could be there. Because why would you want to go to work for somebody who's already giving off a negative vibe or somebody who's very demanding? Not very many, because it's not helpful. It's in the way. That means whether or not we're accepted is occupying part of our subconscious instead of letting our subconscious actually fix that algorithm, right? So now it's always worried. It's always in a heightened state. So that is why you would turn down one interview and not another based solely on your gut feeling. That's where that comes from. But it's not your fault that you did so well because you're awesome that you got promoted, right? It's not your fault. Good news is leadership is a muscle. You can build it. Clearly right now I have not been building it, but I want to kind of accompany this with a story of when it mattered. So I'm definitely not one of these CrossFit people, but I got really excited about lifting weights. And I said, okay, I want to learn this because I want to feel like Wonder Woman and I'm ready. And so we started this process and I was gung-ho. About 2 months into it, I went to my trainer and I was really disappointed. I said, I am so tired and sore. I thought you said that like the soreness would go away after a few days, but it like never does. I'm always sore. Is anybody else always sore after they lift weights? Or is it just me? And I said, what's going on here? He's like, come here, let me show you something. So he took me into the secondary weight room and he sat me down and he moved some weights around and said, okay, go ahead and lift this. So I do. And he says, was that taxing? And I said, no. Okay, what are you trying to say? And he's like, I'm saying that I never told you how much weight was on the bar because it's not important. It's important that I see where you're struggling. And then as you grew in strength, I added more weight. So when I take it off and give this to you now, that is where you started 2 months ago. But you just didn't notice because you've been building muscle this whole time, right? That's why you've been sore. Because has anybody here actually led a team, managed a team? You keep getting sore, don't you? There's always more pain that comes along, but it's different. Now it's a different pain. It's not like the same one, because once you've learned that muscle and how to deal with that particular one, then you can pivot and deal with something else. So it can feel at first very disheartening. You're like, nobody likes me. I've had 2 people quit on me. I can't ship this on time. I feel like I need to just code this myself and go in there. And you get very worn down very quickly if you don't see what's happening. It is muscle building. And it does take time, and you probably won't notice unless you kind of measure a little bit about what you've conquered along the way. Sometimes you'll have really great, very smart, emotional people on your team, and they'll tell you how they need to be treated. But most of us aren't that way. We just hope that our boss is not an asshole, you know? And we don't tell them how to live their life or what to do, but they want you to do that almost every time. Like, please tell me what I can do to make life easier because I don't want to add more stress so that we don't ship something on time. Yeah? But you've never had this job before, right? So nobody told you that that's how it's really going to be. I went and did a pretty big study, that paper is coming out next year, of what developers want from their leaders. Because I was so interested if what I was experiencing was just me or if it was more of a worldwide issue. And this is what I kind of discovered distilled down. When you feel safe, the natural reaction is trust and cooperation. If you feel safe, you naturally want to go paint a house or go do things together because you don't have to worry about the social anxiety aspect of that. You can just go conquer something. When we don't fear our leaders, then we'll combine our talents to face challenges that come outside of the team, like, I don't know, a salesperson telling us something that is literally impossible for us to do. It's better for us to unite and go, well, this is what we can give you, than worry about fighting amongst ourselves and being a little afraid of our leader. Let's fix this problem, and then we can kind of go as a cohesive unit and honestly slay all the dragons. They want good leaders that make them feel safe is the number one feedback that I got after polling literally hundreds of developers all over the place. Another thing that was really specific is that you need to feel safe to fail. So I have never felt this way because I put myself at a high standard. That before I ship code, I'm going to test it and I'm going to make sure that it's not going to fail. I'm sure that the person at Amazon that wrote just one line of code and unfortunately erased a bunch of data in a region really thought that everything was good and he was setting things up, but the system was imperfect. It's not that the human isn't perfect. We already know that. So why wouldn't you put a system in place that allows people to fail safely before we ship something important? I cannot stress this enough. You are not infallible. You are awesome because we've all established that you're a brilliant coder, but you're not infallible and you could be tired because you're too obsessed with coding way more than you should be, and you will make a keystroke that was a mistake. It just is happening. So ask yourself, if the entire team was suddenly junior developers, what would break if they push something? And can you put anything in place that would help them with that? And can you communicate that to your team? Because if you do, then they don't feel so worried about trying new things out and trying something that may or may not work. Because they know that, oh, at least they're not going to bring down the whole company, right? But also they need to feel safe to confide in you. And this is tough because not everybody's a people person. Sometimes I don't want to know about all of the heavy things that are happening at home for you, but that's not what that means. You are not their therapist. There are professionals for that, but what they need to be able to confide in you is something that you ask them to not share with the team, like, I need time off, I'm grieving the loss of something. It doesn't need to be long. You just need to be able to keep that in confidence and not share that with other team members, even if you're really frustrated. And this is violated a lot more than you think. So just keep that in mind, that you need to make it very obvious that you know how to keep confidence and keep that safe. They also wanted to, at least from the feedback I got, was they want a leader that actually has some vision. That's pretty tough. I have no vision. I'm just trying to survive life, man. What does that even mean? You know, I don't know. What I've distilled down after working for some awesome leaders and some bad ones over the years is that the mission doesn't have to be crazy big. It just needs to be something as simple as, yes, I know we are working on very boring government software, but our mission can be that we will always have really clean code here and we'll find new ways to do this better or that better. And that's just our mission of our team, regardless of what project we're working on. And that can be something that your team will get behind, is that you are a leader who's not just, I don't know, I don't care, just ship it. You care about the quality because of the art of code, because of the art of what we're in. People will get behind that even if it is a boring project. So that's all we're asking, is find something that you find really interesting about it, that you think can truly be more mission bound, and people will follow you. They also want leaders that can inspire others to the calling and the part of it. So instead of, this is my singular vision, I'm the Steve Jobs of everything needs to go this way, why not incorporate some ideas that people have? Here's a secret. The less you've been in development, the more ideas you have. You have no, because nobody's told you it's impossible yet. Nobody's told you that is something that doesn't work, right? So you're like, well, can't we do something like this that can drop like drones in that section, and all of a sudden everybody has this, and you're like, well, no, tell us more. And maybe it just kind of jostles things up enough to invigorate the team to have them start thinking about things they would like to do. This is possible even with the boring projects. Most of the stuff I have done over the past decade has been definitely things that most people would not get out of bed for. But like, they're important, I guess. I did work on not important things like a Snapchat filter, but I'm just saying that I've worked on things that it isn't really even about that project. It is about the process and the different ways in which we could approach it. This is totally possible regardless of where you work. So I don't want to hear that, oh, you didn't get to work at a new startup to get that feeling. Most developers also would like you to be flexible. This is tough because you get no flexibility from your boss. It's just, this needs to happen. Here's the deadline that we arbitrarily set. But here's the deadline, just make it happen. Go. And you're like, great. So I have no flexibility, but I'm expected to be flexible to all my devs. This puts you in a spot, doesn't it? The reality is, the more pressure that people feel, the less likely they are to give quality work. However, if you're like me and you have a brain that decides that it needs a deadline in order to even activate, break it down into much smaller deadlines for them and be like, hey, let's just try this one thing and get something done by the end of this week, because it will get everybody kind of feeling good about one part of what they're shipping. Then it doesn't feel so overwhelming. I have a real issue with follow through. I have my whole life, because I get to the hard stage and I'm like, I need more time for this and the deadline's here. So I just kind of throw my hands up. I'm like, I don't know, I need an expert to come in. And it often is not a difficult thing. It's just that I was given too much information at once that I had to solve. Okay? So this is, again, something that you can control, right? This is one of my favorite ways of putting this. If you have hard times in your family, would you consider firing them? I mean, maybe you would. I don't know your family situation. But think twice about what is really going on with your developers, because if they seem really abrasive or they don't want to turn on their video on Zoom or something like that, don't be so quick to judge the situation. You shouldn't sacrifice people to save the numbers and the deadline. Just be like, oh, not fast enough, get out of the way. That is almost always the wrong choice. If you hired the wrong person, okay. But is everything going to fall down if that one person doesn't deliver? Really? You got to look at your process then. What is your bus factor? Is anybody familiar with the bus factor? Okay, a couple of you. Yeah. Just for those who don't know, a bus factor is how many developers would it take for this entire project to sync if they were hit by a bus? So if you have a bus factor of 1 and that's you, that's bad. That means nobody under you actually knows how to hold things up. I believe in knowledge sharing, not knowledge hoarding, like what Scott Haslam was talking about earlier. And that's so important in every stage of your project that everybody needs at least one other person who understands what that module is doing. Okay? So if you have that, that means that if you have somebody who truly is not a good fit, the project won't fall on its face because you still have at least one other person that knows what's going on in that aspect. Okay? If you are a contractor, however, and you are the sole proprietor of your company and you're the one delivering, that's rough, right? You don't have anybody, it's just you. This is the point where you renegotiate your contract of how much time you need, and then you go ask the community. You should always have relationships outside of your company that you work for or your own business. And that way, I have people I can call at the drop of a hat and say, do you know how I would approach this problem? And they will always answer. If you don't have people like that in your life, take a look around the room and and just introduce yourself later. This is how it works. This is how it starts, is that you find out what somebody knows that is different from what you know and that you can call on. So now I have like this little wheel of people that I know are experts at this or that, even if they wouldn't admit it, that I could go and ask, right? If you don't sacrifice the people to save the numbers, to save the deadline, they will notice and they will reciprocate. Because usually, if you're at a decently modern company, you get to have a review time. And now, most companies ask your team, how is your manager? Will you review your manager? That's really an intimidating thing to say, right? But that's where you get the real feedback. It's usually anonymous because you don't know which person said what. That's where you get the real feedback about what you're doing. And if you held off all the heavy weight that was much higher in the hierarchy from you, away from your team, they see that. If you took all of the boring meetings so they could actually code, they see that. They know. They know. A technical leader will, and I'm going to list all these out for you. Listen, respect, encourage, recognize, and empower. Now, don't you feel like you're at a TED Talk? And don't worry, I'm not going to give you arbitrary words. I'm going to tell you what they mean. A leader doesn't need to have the first word, the last word, or even most of the words. This is great for us introverts, right? That means we don't have to do a lot of the talking as a manager. We can allow our team to do that. The state of a team will often be made clear to you when you listen and digest what they're saying individually. Most often, you're going to be the one who has to work out communication issues. But remember, you weren't sent to management training, right? Because you're this brilliant coder. So what do you know about communication besides what you do when you talk to a computer, right? That means that now your job has shifted forever. I would argue that without a leader like this, every dev team falls apart. I don't care how good they are individually. Without this person, they fall apart. But that means you may have to leave the coding behind. Sacrifice for the greater good. You can still dip your toes in it and know what's going on, but don't get in the way of letting people on your team be the ones who really blossom and flourish and thrive. Don't be there to show off. I know it's really tempting because you like code. That's why you started this. But now your job is to listen to the ideas, listen to the complaints, and listen for the moments where people kind of want to shine. They kind of want to try something. Okay? Always let an employee go first on a one-on-one meeting. You know what a one-on-one meeting is? Yes? No? Oh, half of you do not. You got a management problem. It's one of the most important things ever to have that. I didn't realize how important they were until I wasn't given any when I worked for somebody. So what I mean by listen is that you need to process what they said, and if an action is required, then do it last. Sometimes we just need to vent. Please let us do that. Please let us just vent. And then at the end go, is there something that you would suggest that you would like done before I make suggestions? Because oftentimes your suggestion might be a little too much, like too quick, too hard, too anything. Maybe they do know what they want. Sometimes they don't. If it's a heavy subject and it sounds like maybe they need therapy, remember, you are not a clinical psychologist. So you need to let the professionals do their job, but let them know that, hey, maybe this is something that you can pursue. If you need extra time off to pursue that, please do that. And that is about as supportive as you need to be. You don't need to diagnose what's going on, okay? Demonstrate active listening by repeating what you heard so they have an opportunity to correct it if it was misunderstood, okay? Respect. This, believe it or not, was the hardest one for me. I don't respect people who are jerks because it's a choice. You don't have to be that way, but you're choosing to be that way. I don't believe, just take me as I am. This is just the way I am. No, that's not how it works. You weren't born a jerk, you just decided to be. And so I have a hard time respecting people that are. But I had to dig deep down because They are this way for a reason. And the jerk that you work with, which is either your boss or your coworker, and everybody has worked with one of these people, is an opportunity for you to realize that everybody has different communicational needs. Okay? This is when my real obsession with the scientific ways that humans interact started. Because I'm like, what is this person getting out of this behavior, this statement, this action? Why would they be a bully? Why would they be a jerk? What I discovered is they're oftentimes very insecure. And when they're insecure, they have to puff themselves up and make themselves feel better by putting you down. This is very cliche, and yet it happens anyway. Like, we know about it, we do it anyway. Kind of like, I know I should eat less calories to lose weight, but I do it anyway. We know about these things, right? So what do you do with that person? This one was very difficult. And it may not be, you might have a great team, but then you hire the one person who will not stop talking about the way that they believe things should be done. And it's okay that they have that excitement. It's not okay that they tell everybody else that their idea sucks and they're wrong. No, they're just a jerk and they're just standing in the way. But you're the leader. That means you can't just let things happen and let somebody who is poisonous to the team, like, infect the rest of them, because then they're going to leave. Because you do nothing, everybody's leaving. What do? Now you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And what's even worse is the jerk is usually a good coder. Right? They usually are. They usually are, because they know they are. Because they know that they're decent at their job. And they don't need to apologize to anybody for the way they are. Okay? Unfortunately, now they're undermining the entire team atmosphere. So what do? You say, please don't be a jerk. And they're like, I'm not a jerk. No, I'm just saying it like it is. I'm just being real. I'm just giving you the truth. Right? I'm just giving you the truth. Ooh. So how do we start off with respect when they don't respect you? Because you feel that really early, especially if they were one who missed out on that promotion and you got it. How do you build this? Start with respecting the differences that you have instead of the temptation of telling them that they're wrong. I know this is hard. I didn't believe this either. I'm like, I'm going to be the virtuous one who's saying, you are being not nice. And they're going to just be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, it will never happen again. That's not how it usually goes. Right? So I had to start respecting what they brought to the table. And in this case, I was working on a mobile project, and they were brilliant Android developer. Brilliant. And I got to be put in lead on the project. But I was a Xamarin developer, so I wasn't as cool as the down-to-the-metal Android developer was, It was a whole thing. So then I decided to acknowledge how much more he must know about some of the UX changes that came through for Android, etc. And, I would really like your help looking over some of this stuff. Because what I did is I gave him that, yes, I instilled that, yes, I did have confidence in him. And then once the walls were down, then I could be like, hey, it would be pretty cool if you could mentor this other person. They usually just want a chance to flex how much they know. Right? But you are measured as a mentor by how much the person grows. And if the person isn't growing, they'll be like, oh, they just don't get it. Oh, maybe you can change the way you talk to them, and maybe they just have a different way of learning. That was the most effective thing I could have done, because then he had to learn that there was more than just hands-on pair programming that could be done. This person was very introverted and needed to just read and digest and go home and do some coding on their own and then bring back the solution for the pull request. Okay? So once they figured that out, he mellowed a lot towards everybody else, because when he had assumed that this person was just stupid and they couldn't grasp what they were doing, it really was that he wasn't communicating effectively. And so it kind of took care of itself once he realized, oh, they're not stupid. They just needed a different way to look at the problem. That's a good way to not say, you're just a jerk, fix your attitude, because nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. And not everyone's a natural-born cheerleader, and I acknowledge that. I remember talking to some people in Sweden about how Americans are viewed as just everything's amazing and we're all so excited, right? We can't help it. It's our culture, right? But I genuinely am that way all the time, right? I'm just like, yay, I'm excited, but I'm also terrified when things go wrong. So like big extremes. It's okay. You don't have to be a cheerleader. You don't have to be like, oh my God, that was an amazing pull request. High five. You don't need to do that. I promise. It doesn't need to be fake. That is what I want to come across. I'm genuinely very enthusiastic, and hopefully it comes through that it's really me. But you don't have to suddenly switch your demeanor to being like this encourager, okay? Being a successful encourager means believing in the ability that the developer has to overcome, especially when they don't believe it themselves. What you say holds so much weight. They go and talk to their friends on Twitch about it. They talk to them like, oh yeah, my manager said this today. I'm sure you've done that, yeah. Oh yeah, I guess we were doing this thing and it didn't go well. So every word you say holds a lot of weight. You don't have to go over the top to encourage at all. You have to see the potential, though, in the person and share it with them often in order for them to push through the hard stuff and make it feel worth it. When a study was done on what actually mattered to any employee, compensation was like number 3. The first one was whether or not they were even recognized. And it is so cheap and easy to do. If you have to set yourself an alarm, a calendar reminder, whatever, that I haven't said something nice about what, Denny has done today or in the past month, then maybe I should pay more attention and look for something genuine to recognize and call out. I didn't think this actually worked until I started doing it. And then when they would leave, I asked them later, what was your most positive memory here at the company? Because if they leave on good terms. And it was always, man, I loved that I was able to do something that mattered. And the only reason they know that something mattered is because we told them that it mattered. We all kind of want that, right? There's a lot more easy jobs you could have than this. So if you slave away and you ship something and you hear nothing about it, what? Even if it's small, that always irked me, especially when you make fixes like super fast and it's like a Friday at like 6 or 7 p.m. and you really wanted to go and spend time with your family, but you're like, oh, this one thing is misspelled. Here, I'll just do a quick PR and I'll push it. And nobody said anything. Nobody gave you a thank you. Nobody did any of it. It's a little rough. So your job now is to pay attention to the small stuff and say, hey, thanks for doing that. It can be a quick Slack message. You don't have to make it an email. If you're in person, which not a lot of us are, but if you're in person with your team, you can obviously just walk by their desk and say, oh, hey, thanks for getting that out the other day. You didn't have to do that. I'm not saying that you have to work 60 hours a week, but thank you for doing that. That was really nice. And that makes a huge impact. Suddenly, that probably lasts them another couple months. Like, oh, I guess I'm good. I guess I'm not going to get fired today. Yeah, that's good, right? It doesn't take a lot. So dig deep, and even if it's the challenging person who seems to get everything wrong, I bet you they got something right, or you weren't paying attention. We spend on average as much time with our coworkers as our family. That blows me away. So it can be pretty exhausting if you don't feel that your effort is appreciated. I went through that recently, actually, before I left the company before, as I didn't feel like I got any feedback. I even asked for it. I'm like, am I helpful? They're like, oh, yeah, you're fine. Oh. When you put so much of yourself, and we naturally do this in tech, when you put so much of yourself into something and it's fine, oh, that sucks. You want it to be really good. You want it to be appreciated. If you're American like me, you want it to be awesome, And if it's not, even though, yes, you did technically check every box, you want to know how to make it better. How do you make it to where it is, that top tier? And that is usually the seed, by the way, of somebody who could be a budding architect or somebody who could grow even more in their career is when they're like, yeah, this is great, but I want to do it a little more. Please give the opportunity for the coders in your group to talk to you about that. And if you have no idea how they could do it better, open it up to the group. This is really good. How would you do this that's even more efficient? That's my favorite word. More efficiently. I never paid attention to performance because my framework did it for me. And then I was like, ooh, but if we have very slow internet down in Australia, how can we make this more performant, right? Technically it works, but like, how can we make it better? And that also allows your team to bond because now they can throw ideas around with each other. And if they don't know, then everybody's going online and checking out all the different options. Delegation is really key. So empowering is probably the hardest thing for somebody like you or like me who has worked really hard to get where they are, because you can only control yourself, right? You can't really control the emotions or the actions of others. So empowering somebody feels like you're giving away a really important aspect to your job. But delegating is the right thing to do. It's painful for me, but it's the right thing to do. Every person will have a different level of confidence here, too. So many people need continuous reminders that they have permission to just go make a decision without you. Remember, if you empower your team right, you can actually have a vacation. That doesn't mean you need to not do your job. It means that enough people remember that bus factor, enough people need to know what to do and feel like they can do it without getting yelled at. And just go do the thing. One good example was, I don't want to be the one to do all your travel. Please just book yourself and then just submit it and I will. As long as it's not like over $5,000, I'll probably. That's an example of one way that you can just divorce yourself from the huge email threads and huge threads you get on Slack, right? That's easy. And if there is an exception, then you deal with it and you take it and you just give feedback. I mean, it's so much better to delegate some of the more important responsibilities to your team, but it's important to not delegate and walk away and never check back in. How will they know if they're doing it right? You never talk to them about it. You just like, oh great, thanks for like doing my job and your job. Appreciate it. Has anybody done their job plus their manager's job? Just me. Oh, you guys have good managers. Yeah. Sometimes it feels like they're not doing anything. Like your manager isn't doing anything. And I never wanted to be that, so I overcompensated and I was like, I'm going to be like the leader that leads from the side and we're going to code together and it's going to be great. When you do that, you will gravitate towards one or two people on your team and not the others, because you'll find somebody whose coding style you're compatible with. So, you got to think about this a little bit. How heavy is the one who wears the crown? Like suddenly it is heavy and it is a big responsibility, but you have to decide why you're doing this step. And the worst thing that you can do is take this step without considering what you will do to other people. You're responsible now for their salary and for whether or not they have a good quality of life at work. Not your company. Don't blame, oh, our policies, I can't do anything about it. You can make a very safe bubble for your team. You absolutely can. You can control a lot more than you think you can. And what's even better is that most people above you are not as technical as you. So when you say it's probably can't be done, what are they going to say? Oh yeah, we know it can be done? No, you're the one who is the technical expert and you're the one who has the team. Don't be afraid to protect your team. Which means you have to care about them at all. And if it makes you feel icky, it's okay. There are other individual contributor paths where you can still do all of the coding you wanted to do and become like a fellow at a very high level. If it makes you feel icky to have to deal with people's emotions, and the bottom line, don't become a manager. It's not worth the $20,000 pay raise you got. I'm just saying, it's not. But if you do this right, you are so influential as to whether or not people stay in this industry. I can't even tell you. A good manager will help catapult a career for a developer, and it leaves a lasting impression for 4 to 5 years. How cool would it be that you got to be part of that? That you got to help empower them instead of losing people in droves? I'm not saying that programming is for everybody, but I think it's for most people. I think it's for most people. And it's okay if you disagree. None of us were born coding. If you were, I'd love to meet your mom. But none of us were born this way. So this is something we had to learn. And I think it is possible to be really good at it, even if you didn't come from a technical background in a family. That brings us to the care. So how do you take care of your junior developers? Well, if you think back to it, how would you demonstrate things to your kids? Or how did you get demonstrated to when you were a kid? If you have to show them first how to do the task. Don't talk in big words and say, we need to deliver this thing and that thing. And they're like, what is that thing? They need to be free to say, what is that thing? And you need to show them physically on a keyboard, this is what I mean. And this is where you would go for more information about that thing. And here is the end result described. Lay it out, lay a nice pathway out. And if they can follow that, remember, they don't have the muscle memory yet of where to go look for stuff. It's not obvious that you go to Stack Overflow sometimes. I don't even go there anymore. I go other places. But it's not always obvious where to go, right? So show them that. Let them make mistakes and remind them that it happens. It happens to all of us. We all like war stories, right? Oh, yeah, that happened to me when I started too. Don't worry about it. Please share that. Because they're already nervous as heck that they finally got a paying job and now they're worried about screwing up. Okay? Just encourage them to get up and try it again and not, okay, well, clearly this isn't your area, so go away and we'll have this other person who knows what they're doing do it. Please don't do that. Have this person come over and ask them questions about what they didn't understand. Not, let me show you how it's really done. No, ask them questions about what part of that process they didn't get and then do it at target because it allows two things. One, it allows this developer to learn how to communicate. And secondly, it allows this developer to feel like, well, they didn't get all of it wrong. They got part of it wrong, which is a confidence builder, okay? So how would you take care of them once they're mid-level developers? This is where coworker pairing is really supportive. You need to support the people who are doing things together. I hate this one. I am not a good pair programmer. I get very intimidated and I feel like everybody's judging me and it's 8 hours of it and I just can't do that for 8 hours. I need to just go away and then come back with it. But it doesn't have to be an intense pairing session. That's what we're talking about. What they mean is, hey, you two figure out how to do this thing. Okay? Together, however way you want to work, figure it out together and you both present something that you both looked at. Right? Do more of those suggestions instead of people being out on a silo by themselves, which I like, but it isn't conducive to the bus factor. Because that means only I know about it, and then I get hit by a bus, and then there's nothing delivered. So please, this is the part where you encourage your mid-developers to deliver things together, at least two people. And now, encourage them to contribute more to projects. You generate a lot of confidence in your mid-level developers by encouraging them to vocalize their ideas and ask them what they think first. So do you have a stand-up? Has anybody done a stand-up where you all report what your progress is in the day in the morning? Okay. Don't let your seniors start. Don't let your architects start. The most junior level to the mid-level developer and up, because it teaches them to have the confidence to speak first. And they may have ideas that you didn't think of because of this. I'm really comfy in this .NET bubble I've been in for 10 years. I'm not really comfy talking about React, but clearly someone else is. Then maybe they'll bring up a different way of approaching a problem than I would. I want to reach into my comfort bubble. I've worked hard for it to be here. You know, I want to do APIs this way. I don't want to do it that way. But maybe that would be a better option. So if you do it least experienced to most experienced, you will see how fast your mid-level developers become your seniors. Because they're able to not have to speak against somebody with more experience than them. They're able to just start from there. And it really humbles your senior developers to listen to how smart the people that are more junior to them really are. Because they're actually given the space to talk about what's going on. So how do you take care of these senior developers? You know, what you used to be before you were a manager. You will feel a natural kinship to senior developers. It will be natural because you get it. You've both been through lots of different scenarios in tech, so you'll probably naturally be able to talk about more things. The way you take care of these people is to allow time for individual experimentation and autonomous tasks. That's where they feel they get in that flow state. Remember that first slide where he got to really think and just let it flow? It's hard to flow if all you're ever doing is mentoring. So please give them the gift of doing some autonomous tasks where they get to be creative and they get to have that flow state, because that's really what we want, right? I think that's so cool when you get in that moment where you get to everything flowing together. But ask them to bring new ideas to the team, because they're the ones who have really thought about it the most, right? And explain why, not just because I've thought of it. Explain why and show visually why. That means you are training this person to be able to communicate very highly, like what you do. Once you get to this level, that means they can talk to anybody, not just other seniors. They can talk to much more junior people than them. And that means they could also talk to people who are not in tech about what's going on, because they're able to step down the ladder of difficulty. So let's talk about personalities. So we kind of understand what to do now that we've walked through for each career path, part of the career path, but now we each have individual personalities that we're throwing in there. So how do you feed an introvert? Oh man, this one was difficult because we are very attracted to this particular type of field because we don't have to go be in customer service, right? And so we do this. But what's necessary to realize is these are the people who will get burnt out so fast from meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. It takes energy to log on and talk to people or have them whether it's in person or online. And if you do that, they will have nothing left in the tank to even like work on stuff because they're exhausted just from the person to person interaction all the time. So be mindful of those people who are introverted. And all I would say is that yes, we all need to get together, but be respectful of time. And you want to, be supportive of however they can produce their best work, right? But if it takes a lot of energy to be in meetings 80% of the time, that's probably not conducive. So be mindful of how quickly their energy goes away, that they have to muster to deal with others. How do you feed an extrovert? They're the most fun, aren't they? They're just so bubbly and out there, and they're the first ones who will volunteer for things, They're also the ones like, yeah, we need a team outing together. Let's do the thing. And they're great. They're a little overwhelming for some people, but what's good about them is that they will bring the morale of your team up. They'll bring it way up. So it's good to recognize, even if you're not one of those people, what they can bring to the table. But what the introvert brings to the table is interesting. These are the most reflective people. These are the ones who will go into another room for a while, think about it, and then bring back this basket of profound thought about the problem. Because they haven't had to deal with just the person interaction, they've been able to really deeply think about the problem. So you see, both of these people, from a personality standpoint, do bring something to your team, even if they're not like you. So how do you feed an optimist? We all know these people. Oh, you use this library, it's going to be amazing. It's great. Solving all your problems. It's going to be great. What they need to thrive is they need a shot at hope. You need to say that things are not abysmal. You need to at least let them look and examine a new way so that there's hope again. Okay? That's what they need. But as much as we need an optimist somewhere on the team, man, do we need the pessimist. The pessimists, I've met a lot more of them in their senior years than in their junior years. But what they bring to the team is very easy to describe. The optimist brings, let's do this great new framework. Let's do this great new whatever. And they're the ones saying, right, so how many stars on GitHub does that have? Right, so who's going to be maintaining that code? Or are they just going to yank it from us and all of a sudden nothing works in the future, right? They're the ones who check the optimists on reality. At sometimes as a manager, this person can feel very challenging for you because they're always down, they're always, negative. But they do bring that check and balance to the rest of the team. And that's your opportunity to acknowledge that you appreciate that they keep the team in check. What do we do about sensitive folks? Oh, that could be a lot of us, right? Sensitive people are rough because they can feel the entire morale of the team. They're the ones the most plugged into probably what's happening. They feel that things are off with the sales department or another coworker. They're just very, again, plugged into the human side. So this is a great opportunity for you to talk to them about how they feel things should go for everybody, because they're more likely to be selfless than selfish. How do you feed a bold person? Do you even need to feed them? I mean, I feel like they just are born excited about life. Bold people are really hard for me because they can be bold and unkind, right? They can be unkind. Some people are really bold and they're kind and they're great. We love those people, but they can be unkind too. How do you feed somebody like that? I'll tell you what, it gets worse if you just keep a lid on them and tell them to be quiet and not go in the corner. You need to be giving them things that they can maybe present to other departments in your company. Like, hey, why don't you tell people what the roadmap is for all of our dev releases? And they're like, yes, I'm on that. And they'll put it together and and they will feel very fulfilled. But you got to give them a chance to channel the boldness somewhere. Sometimes the boldness is, hey, I volunteer to find another way to do something. Can I present it? They're usually the ones who want to present stuff. How do you feed a bright individual that is, you can tell they're really smart. They may not have all the knowledge yet, but you know probably in a few minutes talking to somebody in an interview, wow, they seem to really like dream big and they seem to have a lot of ideas. They just need to probably pair with somebody that has any sort of influence over your product whatsoever. So that means they can think outside of what is currently possible and they can take you to the next level with stuff. Okay? There are many developers that fall into this category, but they're not bold, but they're just quiet dreamers. And they really are the ones who say, hey, maybe we could return the rocket to Earth backwards instead of just throwing it away over the ocean. Which leads me to the last one, which is not a personality. This is something that can happen to any one of us. We can go through a lot of stress, we can go through a lot of tragedy, or we could just be burnt out as a developer. Downhearted people have a really hard time showing up and giving their best self, but you see them want to try, and you see that they are trying, but it's just, they're very aware that they suck and they're terrible and they just know, right? This is the moment where you give them the space to go talk to somebody about these things. Don't go judging them. Just be like, hey, I noticed that you don't seem very happy in what you're doing. I'm not happy. And make sure you immediately follow up with, there's many times in this profession that I have been burnt out or I have whatever. Let me give you the space just to go figure it out for a little while. You don't need to diagnose them. You don't need to be any of that. You just need to be quietly supportive. Disconnected people are the worst. Over the past several years, that's how I felt. I was very disconnected from everybody. I felt very much an individual and not part of a team. But if you follow kind of the steps that I've outlined here, I'm far from an expert, but this is something that I've learned. If you just start with this deck, and I'll definitely post it for y'all, and learn how to treat your team as a whole, you're going to be a lot more successful with reuniting disconnected teams, whether you have the opportunity to do it in person or not. As a manager, I can tell you this, demanding that your team not be remote is a mistake. It doesn't mean you can't have mandatory team outings where you all get together. That's fine. But if you say, no, we have to be in person because I feel like I don't have control when they are remote, is more of an insecurity inside of you than a vulnerability in your team. It's an opportunity for you to fix a lot of the way you communicate. I've been in a remote first team for 3 years. It's been the best experience. It means that nobody is left out of a conversation because we think online first. And if we're in person, great. So I will say this, I know I'm running out of a little bit of time here, and I will post this. I'm going to close with one of my good friends' best quotes. Trust your team's judgment. You may need to step in to make decisions and priority calls, but this will be on the information provided by your team. If you get this right, you should have a good, autonomous, and self-directed team. Thank you for spending time with me today. If you have any questions, let me know. But good luck on your promotion. Thank you.